And specifically, what did we talk about in regards to Joseph? What was Joseph's struggle?
He got put in a pit.
Yeah, it was his circumstances. And so we learned how can we steal back our joy when our circumstances aren't what we want them to be. So this week, we're going to approach joy from a different perspective. But before I jump into the message, I want to tell you a little story. So the pictures that's going to come up is me cut off a little bit, and my friend Mariah. So we were in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, for a state competition for speech team. And I really love doing speech. Some of you guys don't know this, but I was banned from doing varsity sports because I had too many concussions. And so when I got into high school, I just did a lot of academic clubs. And it was really fun. Most of the events I did for speech team were speeches I would just kind of write right before I'd have to give them. So like 5 minutes before. Super fun. Really enjoyed it. Up until the competition, before I went to states, I went to the national qualifiers and ended up winning 3rd place in my category, but my confidence was really shaken because one judge had written on my score sheet that she thought I had a speech impediment, which I think was true. I think is true. I've never been officially diagnosed, but I know because my teeth are kind of funny, which you guys know all about that, that it's hard for me to say the letter S. And I'd been working on it with my coach, and the judge still rated me pretty highly, but then basically was like, I don't think you should keep doing this. Like, it was kind of like she felt bad for me, and so she rated me highly because she felt bad, but I shouldn't continue doing what I loved. And it kind of like broke me because I love doing speech team. It was a really good opportunity for me to tell others about Jesus, and it kind of felt like part of my identity was being taken away for something I didn't choose. Like, I didn't choose to be born and have issues with my teeth, and so it's kind of frustrating that she was like, you can't do this because something you didn't choose. So why did I tell you this story and show you this kind of cringy picture for me when I was in the 10th grade? Great question. Because as I was thinking about the person I'm going to be talking about tonight, I feel like my story is very similar to this person's story. So tonight we're going to be reading an interaction between Moses and God in Exodus 4. So if you have a Bible, feel free to flip there. But this is a moment where Moses almost didn't fulfill his God-given purpose because he had a problem with his speech. And so he was just like, counted himself out. The Lord had given him this purpose, and he was like, I can't accomplish this because I'm not good enough, is basically what he said. And so he felt as though because he couldn't do it in his own strength, he would never be all that God wanted him to be. So before we jump into the text, and you guys are flipping to Exodus 4 if you want to be there, a little bit about Joseph up until this point, because it's still pretty early on in his story. Just really quickly, in Exodus 1, which is like kind of where we leave off from last week in Genesis 50, Joseph is forgotten about in the land of Egypt. And so the Israelite people actually become oppressed. And so Pharaoh puts out this decree that all Hebrew boys are to be thrown into the Nile River. The girls can stay, but the boys must be thrown into the Nile because he was fearful that the Israelite people would eventually overtake the Egyptians and he would not be able to keep them in oppression. Thankfully, Moses' mom, in faith, puts him in a basket, sends him down the Nile River, where Pharaoh's daughter takes him in. So he kind of grows up, kind of confused about his identity. He was a Hebrew boy, but he was in Pharaoh's court because Pharaoh's daughter had taken him in. And this is kind of where Moses is at when God gives him this assignment. And so the passage that we're in, starting at verse 10 through 17, says this. So Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent." So this is after the Lord's basically telling him, like, hey, I have this plan for you. He says, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send somebody else." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so you can perform signs with it." So essentially, and if you want to write this in your handout, essentially what we are seeing in this passage is that Moses is rejecting his call because he feels inadequate with who he is. And I don't know about y'all, but I've been there before. I mean, primarily in the example that I shared in my story, but I think it's something that we can all feel sometimes. Maybe you tried out for a sports team, and maybe you wanted to try out for a sports team, but you didn't because you didn't feel like you were good enough, and you just disqualified yourself before you even had the opportunity to try. Maybe you never picked up an instrument or auditioned for a musical because you just knew that you would never be as good as the other kids in band or orchestra or in the musical. And maybe you've never picked up a hobby that you really wanted to do, whether that's art or roller skating, running. I don't know what it is. Vast amount of interest in the room. But maybe you decided you didn't want to try something new because in your head you knew that you were always just going to fail. And maybe for some of you it goes deeper than trying out for a sports team or auditioning for a musical. But maybe some of you have had a hard time making friends because you knew that if you tried to get out of your comfort zone, you would only ever fail and be made fun of. Maybe some of you are already thinking about what you want to do after you graduate high school, but you don't want to pursue the big dream that you had, whether that's going into worship ministry or some kind of other ministry, or maybe you want to be a skilled craftsman, or maybe you want to be a lawyer, or whatever that is for you, but maybe you've already decided that you don't have the knowledge that you need or the skills that you need in order to get there. And maybe for some of you, it goes as deep as never letting yourself dream anything big because you're scared that you will only be disappointed because you've already decided in your head that you will never be enough to be the person that you want to be. I know I've been there. I know when I was in middle school and high school, there were many times I didn't audition for musicals because I didn't think my voice was good enough. I didn't audition for different bands when I was in band because I just knew that other kids were going to be better than me, and I never gave myself the chance. And really for me, it went as deep as the decision to almost not go to college, especially not Grace College, because I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and I never thought I'd be able to learn all the other things that all the other kids knew. And so I had just counted myself out. I was scared that I was going to show up and ultimately just waste money because I'd never be where I wanted to be, and so I would just drop out because I wouldn't have the knowledge to get through school. And so after reading this passage, I think if you felt that way, no, I felt this way, I think Moses has felt that way too. Before he could even let himself consider what the Lord was going to do through him, I mean, hey, the Lord had already spared him from death, but before he could even dream further than that, he had already decided that he would not be enough. He did not consider what the Lord could continue to do through him, and so he counted himself out. He assumed there was no growth, he would never be able to learn how to speak, and so he wasn't fit to fulfill the call that God had given him. And I think in some ways this is fair, and I think in some ways if we felt that way, that's fair. There were definitely some bands that I wanted to audition for that I just knew I didn't have the skill at the time to be good enough. And I knew that if I wanted to try out for like varsity volleyball or softball in high school, I would have just been a laughing stock. Like there is some like level to this of like if Moses did know himself and he knew he couldn't do it, I think there's some, healthy like rationalization there of like, y'all have seen me play gaga ball in 9 square. I'm not athletic, so if I was like dead set on playing varsity softball, that would be embarrassing for me. So I don't want to completely, cut Moses down. But I think what we see through Moses, if we learn something through Moses, this thing that we should apply for us. It's not about Moses, and it's not about us and what we can do. But if the Lord is calling us to something, he will make a way through it. We just have to be willing. So tonight, as we read Moses' story and kind of break it down, as we learn how to steal back our joy when Satan tempts us to feel as though we aren't enough to be who God called us to be, created us to be, we are going to learn 3 specific things that we can do to steal back our joy, and it's kind of the encouragement and the reminders that the Lord gave Moses. And so if you are writing your notes in, number 1, which I'm now realizing, typo 1, 2, 1, should be 1, 2, 3. As Hannah Montana says, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has those days. But number 1, Moses' weakness makes a way for God's power. So Exodus 4, 11 through 12, just to reread it, says, "The Lord said to him, 'Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. So in the very beginning, before yes, read. The first one, the very first one, that Moses is rejecting his call because he feels inadequate with who he is. Yeah, see, if you don't have to spell inadequate, there it is. Yeah, to jump back into point one, the Lord reminds Moses that it's not in his own strength that he will be able to convince Pharaoh to let his people go, because ultimately that's what the Lord is calling him to do. The Lord is asking Moses to go stand before Pharaoh and help bring the Israelite people out of slavery. But the Lord is trying to show Moses it's not about what he can do, because really, apart from God, we can't do anything. We can't speak, we can't see, we can't hear. We are who we are because of who the Lord is. And so basically what the Lord is saying to Moses is like, hey, if you're just faithful to go, if we, even in our current situation today, if we are faithful to go, the Lord will be faithful to give us what we need. We don't even have to have the strength to take the first step. We just have to trust that God is going to get us through. We need to have the humility to say that I can't even take the first step. It might be a 10-step, 15-step, 20-step plan the Lord has for us. But we have to admit that we can't even do the first step on our own, that it's only through the Lord, that we have to humble ourselves, and we have to admit, like, God, we cannot do this without you. And so really Moses' issue here is that, not that he lacked self-confidence, because I think there's a very real thing in our humanness that we aren't enough, but what Moses needed to have is he needed to have God confidence. He had to trust that God was going to be enough and to give him enough of what he needed when he needed it. Sure, at the time, Moses was not enough to lead the people out of Egypt, but even as we see in the end of the passage, the Lord had given Moses signs to prove to the people that what he was saying was true. Now, obviously, I just, can't take a staff and split the sea. That's something that the Lord has to do. And so, yeah, Moses is right in saying, Lord, I'm not good enough. But what the Lord is trying to help him see is, Moses, it's not about you. It's about what I'm going to do through you. So, yeah, even for us, the reality is that we aren't enough to be the person that the Lord wants us to be if we're doing it apart from the Lord. It is only by the power of the Lord that you will accomplish all that he has for you. And so, again, to reiterate, the first thing that we should learn from Moses is that our weakness makes way for the Lord's power, and that we should rejoice in our weakness because it allows the Lord's light to shine. And Paul kind of talks about this in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, where he says, "But he being God, said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me.'" So again, it's not about us, and it's about what the Lord wants to do through us. Number 2, what we learn from Moses is that Moses' weakness, our weakness, makes a way for the presence of God's people. You probably could also say partnership, because that's what we're going to see with Moses and Aaron. They're going to come into the ministry to do it together, but even just the presence of other people. And so in Exodus chapter 4, verses 13 through 14 say, "But Moses said, 'Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else.' Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, 'What about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you.'" So again, because Moses lacked confidence in God and what God could do, he pleads for the Lord to send somebody else. But the Lord knew that Moses was created specifically for this task. I mean, as a Hebrew, as an Israelite, he should be the one to lead them out. The Lord could have sent anyone. The Lord could have just killed off all the Egyptians and Pharaoh. But the Lord wanted to accomplish something through Moses and through the splitting of the sea. And so Moses is like, "No, you have to do this. But I acknowledge you don't feel like you can do it, so let me send you a helper. Someone to come alongside you and help you walk out your call." And so specifically, the Lord sends Moses' brother, which is awesome, because it's somebody who knows Moses, it's somebody that Moses trusts, and maybe somebody who is familiar with Moses' issue with his speech. There's a lot of, contestedness amongst what it actually means for him to be slow of speech, so we won't fully know exactly what that means, but Aaron knew, and so there was that trust built there. And not only is this like, there's this relationship there with trust, but the Lord sent somebody who could do what Moses felt like he couldn't do. And so I think the encouragement for us is the Lord knows our weakness, and he is faithful to provide for us when we ask for his help. Additionally, he loves when his people come together to share the gospel with other people. Like, Abby is great at doing music, but if we were to have her, like, I don't know, try to bring people in doing gaga ball, maybe not your thing. Or finger jousting. That was fun to watch, but if we're trying to bring people in being like, look at Abby's mad finger jousting skills, maybe that's not the thing. Or, again, for Xavier, music, you're really great at that. But I don't know if I want you doing my admin stuff, because we know that that's not always your strongest suit. And so basically we see the same thing with Moses, of like, Moses is really good at leadership. Moses like was able to, articulate to Aaron what the Lord would have him to say, but you wouldn't find Moses in a platform like this because he couldn't speak well. And so I think our encouragement, even from Moses, when we kind of try to figure out what our calling is what Paul writes to the church in Ephesus in chapter 2, verse 10. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Maybe some of you in here aren't even rejecting your calling. Maybe you just don't even know what your calling is. Maybe you feel like you don't have a calling. But our encouragement here, in the same way that Moses should feel encouraged, that just because he couldn't speak well doesn't mean that he missed his calling, but maybe you haven't discerned your calling yet, or maybe you feel like you don't have one. But Paul tells us, hey, actually that's not true. We all have been created to do something, and you have been created uniquely to accomplish something that the Lord has for you. And so if we want to think about it kind of like in a team dynamic, think about like a band. Like Lily can really attest to this. Like if Lily was the only person in the marching band, it'd be cool to watch her play by herself, but we'd miss the beauty of the fullness of all the instruments and the color guard if it was just Lily. Or think about your football team, or your cross-country team. I know cross-country is a little bit different, but like when you're running cross-country, like those people alongside you, like having you set pace. Or if you're the only person on your football team, then the other team's probably, gonna really beat you because you're the only person on your team. Or what about in your school, in your different clubs, or even in your family? Like if it was just you, like it wouldn't fully represent all that the Lord would have for you. And so, yeah, another great example is our worship band. I'm sure Abby would do great on the piano and singing, but how much cooler is it that Lily's over there on the bass, or Kenny is back here cooking on the drums? Like, I was looking at Kenny tonight, I could never do that. That is amazing. But think about if it was just Kenny playing the drums. It'd probably be a little hard. It'd probably be pretty hard to worship the Lord if it was just Kenny and nobody was leading and nobody was singing. And so what we see through Moses and what our encouragement should be for us is that nobody was created to do all things all the time. We have specific talents, specific gifts, specific roles, and we're just one piece of a larger puzzle. So I'm not going to read this whole passage to you, but if you want to learn more about that, Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 12, 14 through 20, about how we are all members of one body. So he talks about different people being an ear and a foot and a hand. And it's like the foot can't say to the ear, or the ear can't say to the hand, or whatever, that we don't need you. Because like if you didn't have your ears, like your hands and feet are good, but if you're playing football and there's like refs calling plays and stuff, I don't really know football, but I feel like hearing is probably pretty important. Or if you didn't have feet, then it would be pretty hard to play football. Or if you were singing, if you couldn't hear, that would be pretty hard. And it's like everybody represents a specific part of the body, and we're only fully complete when we have all of us together. And so, the second thing that we should learn from Moses is that in our weakness, we can make way for the presence of God's people. In our weakness, other people can come alongside us to fill the roles that we were not designed to fill. Oh.
I ain't Flash, but I ain't write that down. I showed it for like...
That's okay, we're getting there. And then number 3, which is the second number 1 on the handout, because I unfortunately did have a typo, is that Moses' weakness, and then ultimately our weakness, makes way for God's provision. And so the end of the passage, 15 through 17, says, "You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth." This is Moses shall speak to Aaron and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take the staff in your hand so you can perform the signs with it. God had it all figured out for Moses. Before he was born, it was all figured out. When the edict from Pharaoh was sent out, it was all figured out. When Moses was floating in the basket down the river, not really knowing what was going to happen to him, but also he was a baby, so he probably wasn't really thinking about that. He was probably crying because he was hungry. But when that was happening, the Lord had it all figured out for Moses. It was the Lord that was going to instruct Aaron and Moses about what they were going to say. It was the Lord that gifted Aaron with the ability to speak well and Moses with the gift of leadership to lead the people out of Egypt. And it was the Lord who gave power to the staff to validate what he was doing through Aaron and Moses. So in the same way, the Lord had the plan figured all out for Moses, all 15, 20 steps of it, before he even accepted and stepped into his calling. The Lord has your plan figured out for you too. So in the Psalms, chapter 139, a really great psalm. You should read it if you have a chance. It says this: "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. You saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them to come." The Lord already knows every single day you're going to have, every big and little decision you will make. Every time a boy or girl in your life might break your heart, or thank you, whether you should pursue that or not, what college you will go to, if you go to college, where you will live, what you will do with your life, and so on. Even what you will wear to school every day. He knows everything about you, which means he knows what you'll need in every season of your life before you even get to all those seasons. And so, if you are in a season of uncertainty or don't really know how to achieve your calling, know that God has it all figured out for you. In the same way that it is his power that allows you to take the first step, he will provide for you on every other step on the path. And while it's great to be visionaries and to think, okay, what's step 10 down the road, just focus on taking that first step in his power. And just trust that as you continue along in the journey, that the Lord already has it figured out, and that you don't have to be at plan 20 or step 20 when you're on step 2. It's okay to just live in the present and allow the Lord to do what the Lord's going to do while you're just present in what he's currently doing in your life. So, yes, we just have to humble ourselves to say that we don't know what's best for us. We don't know what the best 20th step is. And we have to have faith to trust that God's way is the best thing for us. And so, as we're wrapping up a little bit, I want to flash forward us a little bit. So, Exodus 14, 13 through 14. So this is like as Moses is currently in the process of taking the people out of Egypt. It says, "Moses answered the people, 'Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still.'" And so right after he says this, he puts the staff down and the sea splits. And so while he struggled with understanding the Lord's power, the presence for the Lord's people, and God's provision, Moses is now saying in Exodus 14, he's saying, like, you just need to be still. The Lord will fight for you. Because now he's on the other side of that. Once he submitted to the Lord's calling and said, I can't do it on my own, but if God's going to do it through me, I want to abide in. Moses could not have the mountaintop moment without confronting the things that held him in the valley. He would have never experienced the Lord's power, the partnership with Aaron, or experiencing the Lord's provision for his life if he couldn't humble himself to say that he couldn't do it without God. And so, in our weaknesses, we can truly be grateful for the Lord's power, people, and provision in our life if we're willing to submit to that and say, yep, I can't do it without you, Jesus. I need you to do it. And so, when we are tempted to wish the Lord made us differently and that we didn't struggle with our speech, or we were more athletic or taller, or whatever it is that you struggle with, know that you can steal back your joy by trusting that the Lord is going to use your weaknesses to allow his light to shine through you. And so, I don't have the picture up here. I forgot to put it in. But that night, I made the decision, when I found out I made it to day 2 of the state competition, that I wasn't going to let what one person say hold me back. And maybe I struggle with my speech because my teeth are a little crooked, but it was an opportunity for me to tell other people about Jesus. And maybe I'm not going to be perfect, and maybe I'm going to mess up speech sometimes, but I shouldn't allow other people to steal my joy if that's what the Lord called me to in that season. So as we close tonight, I want to invite Brandon up a little bit, allow him to share a little bit of his story and how he's seen this at work in his life. Just to give you guys another example, different from me, different from Moses. And then after Brandon shares a little bit, we will break up into small groups.
Hey, how's it going? Don't mind my voice. I just want to be like, I'm Batman. Just because of the way it is. Yeah, that didn't go as well as I thought it would, but... So, most of you guys know that I have cancer. And even through this fight, I've maintained a very positive outlook. And, one morning, I woke up, and this is what my voice sounded like. And I was like, oh, no big deal, right? God's still going to use me. All this good stuff's still going to happen. The next day, my voice is still like this. And day after that, my voice is still messed up. And it got to the point to where it really did start becoming a big deal. There was a Saturday morning I woke up and I didn't have a voice. I couldn't talk. And I ended up getting into a really, really deep place, a really dark place. I was at the point to where if I don't have my voice, I can't worship God. I can't talk to you guys, you ladies. I can't pray. I can't interact in men's group. I can't talk to my kids. I can't tell my wife I love her. Just took me to a place to where, I wanted to give up. And so Jesus, one day when I was reflecting and praying, Jesus took me back to Scripture when Jesus was done ministering to a group of people. He sent his disciples out on the ship while he stayed back and prayed. And while his disciples were on the ship, it started storming. And Jesus actually started walking out onto the water towards the ship. And Peter, in the midst of the storm, sees Jesus walking. And he's like, hey, Peter. I'm sorry. He's like, hey, Jesus, is that you? And Jesus is like, yeah. And, he was kind of like, if that's you, tell me to walk out to you. And Jesus is like, come on out. And so Jesus steps out on the water, kind of where I was at before I lost my voice. I'm out on the water. I'm doing great. Got my eyes on Jesus. I'm walking to him and inspiring a lot of people. And for a minute there, Peter took his eyes off Jesus. And Peter started to sink. And Peter had two choices. He could either continue to allow himself to sink and drown, or he could reach his hand up as Jesus is reaching down to him to allow Jesus to pull him back out of the water. I was at that crossroads. I could either give up and allow myself to continue to sink, or I could reach up and allow Jesus to pull me back out and to walk on water with him again. So that's what I did. I got back up. I started walking with Jesus again. There's been so many times through this walk where God has sent people in my life to help me and my family. A good example is when during this, my roof started leaking into my dining room. God had used our men's group to fix my roof. I didn't have to pay a dime. So even in our times of struggles, God will send people to help us. And even in our times of struggles, God will use us to inspire others. When I was first diagnosed with cancer, I laid in bed all day. And I was crying. And honestly, I was more afraid of going to hell than I was of dying, because the lifestyle I was living before I had cancer was not worthy of going to heaven. So I had to make a choice that day as well to follow Jesus. And I said, all right, Jesus, if this is what I'm going to go through, if my journey can impact one person's life, if one person will go to heaven because I have cancer, then it's going to be totally worth it. Because I'm not going to allow Satan to get to me. I'm not going to allow Satan to have 1 inch of satisfaction over my sickness. So as we move on to these discussion questions, what are you struggling with? What are you dealing with? What are you allowing to drown you? What are you drowning in? Is there something in your life that you just need to reach up and say, Jesus, pull me out of this mess I'm in? So I think if you don't have anything else to say, we can move on to these discussion questions. If you want to break up into your groups, and we'll get going on that. Thanks, guys.